I've been told once that the man who has no imagination has no wings. And this is a powerful adage that proves true to why we are here. Once again, welcome to the 14th Leadership Summit, or rather, Leadership Skills Development Summit. Indeed, you have crossed over to day two. I just want to say to everybody that is tuned in, well done for making it not only to the summit, but making it through this very rigorous and difficult year as we face the pandemic of COVID-19. It's changed a lot of things. It's set trends. It's taken us back. But most importantly, it's helped us evolve. We're now questioning ourselves to what are the things that we can invent? How can we evolve as people? If you've tuned in today for the first time, you missed out on a lot. Yesterday was truly exquisite. We had amazing, conversations about economic recovery through skills development. How do we ensure that TVET colleges, are becoming a bit more famous than your usual university, based on the fact that TVET colleges offer a lot of opportunity for people to practicalize their theory. We also spoke about the importance of a growth mindset, emotional intelligence, looking in the aspects of skills in the manufacturing sector and so forth. So that was truly, truly phenomenal. We had great speakers, and I'm sure you can tune in onto our YouTube channel after this summit to check on the particular insights that were shared yesterday. Please don't forget to hashtag Skills Summit 2021, and don't forget to visit our virtual exhibition. We truly are honored to have you tuned in with us this morning and this afternoon. We have an amazing program ahead today, a lot of panel discussions. We're looking at how does the transition look from secondary to tertiary education, how to overcome the articulation gap, because we know that 50% of a lot of the students that are, capsulated in our university, some of them don't make it. And I think that's the gap that we're going to be discussing today. Are they ready for that transition? Later on, we'll also be looking at sustainable technology startups supported by local and international partners in partnership with Technology Innovation Agency. And they have been a proud sponsor of the Skills Development Summit. And we've had them with us for a couple of years now. And that panel discussion will be facilitated by Ms. Sanisha Monsami, who's the head of Innovation and Skills Enterprise Development at Technology Innovation Agency. Later on, we'll then have a panel discussion around future-proofing skills. That's so true in the nature of its word. How do we future-proof young people and those who are unemployed against the skills that are desired in the future? So the World Economic Forum predicts that we will need to reskill more than 1 billion individuals by the year 2030. How are we going to do that? And it basically speaks to the nature of skills development and also the fourth industrial revolution. We'll also be looking at SMMEs at the heart of economic recovery. Do they possess the right skills? And that will be our concluding panel discussion for the day. Stay tuned. I'm reminded of Mr. Alvin Toffler's words that say the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read or write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to welcome you to the second day of the 14th Leadership Skills Development Summit 2021. If you are only tuning in today, then yesterday you probably missed out on a lot. But we still have an amazing panel discussion today and a couple of sessions that will truly do justice to the session that we had yesterday. Please don't forget to hashtag Skills Summit on Facebook. We are Skills Development Summit. On Twitter, it is at Summit_skills. And on LinkedIn, it is the Skills Development Summit. Please utilize that platform to add your comments and to tell us your thoughts. Unfortunately, our comment panel is not working this morning, but we are doing as much as we can to resolve the technicality. And we do apologize for the delay, but indeed, we will continue to share in this beautiful program in the day that we have ahead. I will invite you for our first panel discussion of the day shortly after this. All righty, welcome back to the 14th Leadership Skills Development Summit of 2021. We do apologize for the technical issues which have caused the delay, but we're about to kickstart our day with our first panel discussion. You know, I remember my father used to tell me that the key to happiness is doing things that feed your soul and not your ego. And I think this is a great way to kickstart our panel discussion this morning. We are talking education. How do we transition from secondary school to tertiary education? How do we, overcome the particular articulation gap that currently exists? And joining me this morning on this panel discussion, we have Professor Pieter Steyn, who is the principal and founder of Cranefield College of Project and Program
Recording
Management.
In progress.
And we then have Mr. Bennie Anderson, who is the CEO of the Da Vinci Institute. And I thought Da Vinci was a hotel, so now there's an institute. Now I'm interested, eh? We also have Mr. Nthato Salebi, who's the project director at National Projects, which is a unit in SAICA. And we also have Ms. Merritt Watson, who is an educational psychologist. Very, very critical to have you on this panel, especially the psychology of education. So we're looking forward to engaging further on that. And last but not least, we have Ms. Felicity Havenga, who's the managing director at Pinnacle Skills Evolution. Welcome to everyone this morning, and thank you so much for joining us on this panel discussion. Let me start with perhaps Ms. Merritt Watson. Tell us who you are and where you're from and your ideas of the current topic that we'll be discussing.
Thank you so much for the invitation to share some knowledge with you guys this morning and some of my ideas. I'm an educational psychologist. I'm also in education. I own a school in Edenvale, Johannesburg. So I'm at the coalface of teaching as well as in private practice as a psychologist. It's an incredibly interesting topic and one that I'm not sure we have all the answers for through a textbook or anything like that. Of sheer concern for me at the moment is children who just don't seem to have resilience or seem to lack resilience at this moment in time, or they haven't developed the resilience yet. And who seem to be encountering much difficulty in working independently and establishing a sound work ethic. So yes, it's an incredible topic, and I'm really curious to hear what everybody else has to say.
Thank you very much, Merritt. We appreciate that, and we do look forward to engaging further, particularly on the issue of resilience. Thank you. Felicity.
Hi. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for the opportunity to share and to be a part of this discussion today. It is an absolute honor to be among such great company. I am the founder and the managing director of Pinnacle Skills Evolution, a private FET college, and the space that I operate in at the moment. The topic of conversation today is quite an interesting one, and one that I'm very passionate about. And I'm hoping to speak more a little bit later on two very, very important issues that I'm experiencing at the moment. And those are, the first one is about FET colleges allowing learners access to qualifications that are possibly not appropriate or relevant to them, and maybe possibly just chasing numbers or chasing money. And secondly, governing bodies of tertiary institutions that are insisting on guidance and support policies that we need to have as part of being an accredited provider, but not always enforcing that those policies are being met or are being implemented in the institution. So I'm quite eager to share a little bit more about those. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Felicity. You've also touched on two critical pointers indeed. So yeah, we look forward to engaging further with you on that. Can we then have Mr. Benjamin Anderson?
Thanks, Tabang.
I am the co-founder of the Da Vinci Institute, which is a business school offering qualifications from bachelor's up to PhD.
Wow.
And I am comfortable in saying up front that as a professor of psychology and working in the business management field, I am blatantly focused on social constructivism.
Mm.
The reason why I want to raise it is we talk a lot about education and we hear voices of mode 1 and mode 2 and mode 3. And I'm not sure we are necessarily engaging those constructs as part of this transitioning, for example, from secondary education to tertiary education. The reason being, we are often hearing the complaint that we are stuck in a curriculum framework which is outdated and which belonged to a previous era. And if we want to be politically correct, which is very typically colonialist.
Mm.
Well, if you look at mode 2 and mode 3, it allows for the deconstruction, if you wish, and the reconstruction of knowledge for the purposes of professional development and application. It allows in a transitioning society for people to become co-creators of that knowledge production process. What I miss at large is that the transitioning from school to post-school is in no way co-creative, is in no way collaborative, and bear me, is in no way cooperative of any nature.
Sure.
And I think that's a matter that we, for some reason, although we want to be politically correct in many cases, we don't address this matter. So it's not just a philosophical thing. It's not just an ideology. It's something that I believe we must reconsider if we want to give meaning to what education experience should be for all the people involved.
Thank you very much for that. Sure. Already my head is spinning because I'm thinking there's so many questions that we need to cover. You're raising a very important point there. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Can we have Mr. Nthato Salebi?
Morning, everybody. Apologies with the current load shedding schedule caught us a little bit off guard.
Yes.
My name is Nthato Salebi. I'm the project director at the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants, and I've been working within that space, particularly looking at transformation and growth of the chartered accountancy profession for the past 21 years. Prior to that, I spent 6 years directly within the basic education space as an educator, both here in South Africa and in the United States. And one of my biggest interests around this particular topic is born of my own personal experience, where I had to, go through this process while a student in the United States, having recently arrived from South Africa and being a student in American colleges and having to make a transition in that space. And what really plays a role, particularly for non-white students in a very predominantly white environment.
Yes.
As well as also culturally being slightly different. So for me, it's just been the experience of non-white students around how they transition and what else do they have to contend with besides what colleagues have already spoken about regarding just being and successful within the higher education space. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Salebi. Thank you. Can we have Professor Pieter Steyn? Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. My own perspective is probably a bit different from that of the psychologists. And again, as Nthato said, I also take my own situation into consideration when I think about these things and the opinions that I've formed. But first of all, Cranefield College is like Da Vinci also. We also do a bachelor's to a PhD. And but there's a specific issue around Cranfield, which is very interesting. And that is that the average age of our students is 38. So that's pretty high. There's a big gap between school and the average age of our students. So we work with highly experienced, well, I wouldn't say highly, but quite experienced people all the time, and people who know exactly where they're going with their careers. So it is, in a way, it is a lot easier for us because we don't have all the problems of transitioning from high school, from high school to the tertiary education. And I also look at this from my own career, in that when I left school, I decided to enroll myself as an apprentice. And I qualified also fully in 4 years' time as an artisan. And while I was doing my apprenticeship, I completed my first year engineering with night classes at the University of Pretoria's engineering school, and then went full-time for second, third, and fourth year with a bursary. But what I learned from my own experience was that I would sit in the class, in the engineering classes from the second year onwards, and I had an incredible practical experience already of all the subjects that we were dealing with, like electronics and heat transfer, which I did in the laboratories of research in the laboratories at ISCOR, etc. I can actually name many of these subjects, and I am a great believer in learnerships, for example, and apprenticeships. And I believe that can really fill the gap and assist in that transition from high school to tertiary. I also established a consulting engineering firm later on. And one of our projects, in fact, was Mandela Square. That incidentally is where we've spoken about it. The Da Vinci Hotel is there, is in that. So yes, we created the Da Vinci Hotel as well. All right, but I can also tell you that in my consulting engineering career, and I always had, during the time I was with the University of South Africa and then later on the University of Pretoria's Business School, the university allowed me to carry on practicing. Okay. And that was a great advantage. And I can tell you that whenever I walked onto a site like Mandela Square, I used to take off my engineering hat and I used to put on my artisan hat as a qualified millwright. And that made a very big difference because people immediately have respect for you. Because you've been through that apprenticeship, you've learned everything, you are a qualified artisan. Sure. And I can tell you that helps a lot because it's very important that people trust what you do.
Absolutely.
In practice.
Thank you so much, Professor Steyn. We look forward to engaging further on some of the pointers that you've mentioned. So I think let's start with the discussion. And, there's no other way than to start at this particular point. What are the problems in your spaces that you've encountered around the transition from secondary school to tertiary school? So we'll start with Merritt as an educational psychologist,
And of course, this is addressed to everybody on the panel. In your capacity, and of course, you're experts in your industry, what are the challenges that you have noted with the transition from secondary to tertiary education? Mariette, we'll start with you, then we'll go to Felicity.
One of the main issues that's really stood out for me as both psychologist and educator is parents today care very deeply and always have cared very deeply about their children, but more so now about taking on their children's responsibility. So children, in my opinion, and through my experience, are not allowed to work independently and stand on their own 2 feet and be given license to make errors or be guided around that. So they don't build up their own resilience in terms of, well, this is what I want to do, let me try it, oh dear, I made an error, dust myself off and try again. So they're not accustomed to working independently. They're not accustomed to taking on the necessary workload and the independent working load of a tertiary education scenario. And I agree a lot with Prof. Steyn. Many of the children, it's all about varsity and not about finding careers that are suited to their strengths as well. Yep. And therefore we don't have the buy-in. So the resilience is less because they don't really have the interest. They don't know how to stand on their own 2 feet and fight their own battles because mom and dad always do it for them. And that's become the hassle. And mom and dad have always held their hands through high school and helped them with research and helped them to find the necessary resources, instead of allowing them the opportunities to try and fight their way through it and actually put structures in place, learning not only from a textbook, but from life experiences. And COVID hasn't helped here either. And also often what we're finding is that children are not choosing the subjects that are their strengths. It's more about mom and dad want them to do. Mom and dad wanting them to live their lives through their children. Therefore, you will go to tertiary education. Meanwhile, the child would be better fitted to becoming an artisan. So there's this, while we understand and we acknowledge that parents really want the best for their children, sometimes the over-caringness, if I can say that in inverted commas, smothers a lot of the real life learning opportunities.
Sure. Thank you so much for that. Felicity, how can you extend on what Mariette has just said in your capacity?
I think from my perspective, and certainly I can only speak from my experience in the space that I'm in, and as you've asked, in the FET environment that I'm in, and as I mentioned earlier, the topic, I mean, closing the gap is a challenge all in itself, and I guess that's why we're speaking about it today. And I always like to take big words like articulation, and yes, while I understand what it means, I always like to go and look up the definition of words and try and find a simpler way to look at things. Yeah. And the simplest definition that I found was the way in which parts are joined together. And I think that was a nice way for me to start looking at things and start really thinking about the topic. And I think, yes, there's a lot to be said about the learner themselves and how they lack all sorts of skills. And I do get the psychology of it and et cetera, but I feel that there's a responsibility on the tertiary education institutions as well to play their part and to play their part well. We will always have a group of learners, in my opinion, that are more motivated than others, or that have the skills or that don't have the skills, but there's always something that we can do when they arrive at our door that can either assist them or not assist them. And that's just my view. I touched earlier on a point about providers, training providers or FET colleges, and I don't speak about universities, obviously, because my experience is not there, but we allow learners access to qualifications that they are not equipped to complete successfully. And then we wonder why halfway through the qualification, they are unable to complete the qualification, and we are suddenly struggling with getting these guys to finish, and they are struggling. If we are sitting here discussing all the challenges and feeling overwhelmed, I can only imagine how overwhelmed this person must be who's trying to gain this qualification to do something with their life. a challenge for me is that a lot of FET colleges, in my opinion, and certainly ones that I've worked for in the past and those that come across my path, is that a lot of them are not equipped to even do an assessment. There are no baseline assessments even being done. And the fact that someone has walked out of high school with a matric qualification doesn't necessarily mean that they have maths literacy. The pass mark for maths in South Africa is what, 30% or 40%? I'm not sure of the exact figure. That doesn't tell us that, oh, because you've passed maths at school, and the entry requirement for this particular qualification says that you need maths on an NQF level 4, and because you've passed maths at school, which is considered an NQF level 4, yes, come along, you can start this qualification, and then halfway through, we're expecting you to get 80 or 90% for maths. And you've just scraped through on 35% at school, and it's a royal nightmare where facilitators are now expected to try and get this person to catch up on all the maths skill that they didn't acquire at school. So I think those assessments are important. I think that colleges need to make sure that they have got the skill set to perform those assessments. Excuse me. And I think we need to make sure the responsibility is also on us to ensure that learners are gaining access to the correct qualification that will allow them to be successful. And then the second point was these learner guidance and support policies that we need to submit as part of our quality management system that the governing bodies of colleges ask us to submit as part of our accreditation. And at best, I've seen these policies that are maybe 2 or 3 pages. And this is the very policy that speaks to how we are going to guide and support this learner, how we are going to provide a development plan for them that meets their specific need, that looks at their skill, their strength, their weaknesses. How are we going to stop every couple of months and make sure that this learner is being supported in the correct way? And I see these policies, but I don't see anything being implemented at the colleges with this policy. Is it a tick box exercise for accreditation, or is it something real that is actually meant to be outworked while this person is undergoing a qualification? So I really feel that if we can start working on these, if we can get these policies really built up and focused on an actual working document and not only a compliance document, I really think that this can add to closing that gap and assisting that learner in being more successful, maybe in achieving the qualification at the end of the day.
Thank you. Just also, Bennie, in your experience with the Da Vinci Institute, what have you noted as the challenge to transition from secondary into tertiary education?
Well, Tabang, if we look at research globally, the scientists in education and psychology are arguing self-control sits at the heart of success of individuals. And in monitoring and tracking toddlers through adulthood, through their work life, self-control seemed to be a critical indicator. I'm not sure that I see enough self-control in what's happening in education and the people who participate in education. What do I mean by that? And to Merritt's point, we've got a portion of the population, society, who are not becoming independent learners because their parents do the work. I see it with my peers. How, you sit the evening at home and mom and dad is busy concocting a very brilliant idea for Johnny to present tomorrow morning. But at the same time, there's a large portion of society in South Africa who have got absent parents. But in some way, at the finishing line, the bar is very low. Give me 30%. You make it. Your parents may have helped you, and I make it, who have done nothing. So my concern is the transitioning process is not learner-centered enough, because we're running big numbers, we're running tick boxes, we're running multiple choice questionnaires. We want to finish our task. And that does raise a concern for us as a private university, because our biggest struggle is to get people to formalize a logical argument.
Yes, yes.
Well, because they would say, what do you mean? I've ticked the boxes. Give me a multiple choice question. What do you mean by I must formalize an argument?
Mm-hmm.
So in essence, I'm concerned that we don't have a very particular societal focus on student learner focused. And we are not cognizant of the success indicators, for example, like self-control, as something which should be inculcated from the first day a kid opens his or her eyes, not before, not when they go to school, long before they attend school.
Mm. Sure, absolutely. Mr. Salebi, just please expand on what Mr. Anderson has mentioned, particularly the aspect of those that don't have people to depend on. I mean, already in South Africa, we have about, I think, if I'm not mistaken, 3.1 million child-headed households in the country. It's extremely high. So, Mr. Salebi, maybe let's flip the coin a bit. What are the challenges in your space that you've seen, particularly at SAICA, and also from a perspective of education? You know, non-white students, Black students, you know, just in your space. I think you mentioned it also in your introduction. What are some of those challenges that have hindered the transitioning from secondary to tertiary education, or even SAICA as an institution? You know, what are the you know, transformational issues that you have come across?
Bon, I think Thabang, the challenge for us, I think, is that too often we want to brush aside the effects of our past on many of either our institutions or our way of life, or, you know, things that people find as aspirational, etc. So there's a lot, and it's not to try and dwell, to recognize the fact that there's a lot more that still needs to be done. What colleagues have alluded to in terms of support, what we are finding, particularly with many of the students we support through the Tutuka Bursary Fund, is that in the 13, 14 years the bursary has been working and funding students, we are finding that the majority of the students we fund, even to this day, are first-year university attendees and their families. So we would have thought by now we are finding students that have someone who understands what it is they've embarked on. And we're finding that's not the case. So it then really demonstrates to you how massive then the gap is, particularly for those students, because they are the first ones at university. There isn't any kind of support in terms of anyone who could have remotely prepared them. Forget the basic education system in terms of not only academically, but otherwise preparing them for that environment that they're going to be in for the next 3-4 years, or however long they manage to stay at university. The financial challenges that go with being at university, it's a different ballgame, because while in your school, you might be in a community or in an environment where everyone is pretty much around the same socioeconomic strata, the minute you get to university, you're now exposed to a whole lot more. There's a lot more difference and variance. And by and large, the students that are at university may not look and you know, have the same kind of income. So the support that we're talking about is multifaceted for the many of the students that we fund. It's not just in terms of having the academic backing and the academic foundation, but it's also being in an environment where when you go home, you don't feel alone, you don't feel isolated, you don't feel, you know, that guilt of being the only one who's made it to, quote unquote, that space, and how you then deal with that. So it's emotional, it's academic, it's in many different ways, and frankly, for many of the students who come from those very disadvantaged backgrounds, it's a miracle. And I agree with Mr. Anderson that the issue around the internal locus of control, the self-control, the fact that that's what we have to inculcate in many of our students, to say, you cannot look externally, because externally there isn't that support. You must be very, very self-reliant and very self-driven. And we can only do the best we can to eliminate some of the obstacles that may pose a challenge. So for us, I think in terms of the support, we are realizing that it's a lot more than just having to decipher IFRS and any of the accounting principles or auditing or whatever it is. It has to do with them personally transitioning from their community into this very different community, wherein their English needs to be polished, written and spoken. Their knowledge of certain topics needs to be up to par. So it becomes a lot more that they have to deal with, and that's the challenge with the transitioning that we're seeing with many of the students that we're funding.
Okay, thank you. Professor Steyn, I think my question to you would be, how can we create an appetite for apprenticeship? And I think after Steyn, we'll go back to you, for Felicity, and then we'll go to Merritt, to say, how can we, maybe Professor Steyn, you can look at the apprenticeship part, and Felicity, the part of how do we then conscientize young people to engage and to register with TVET colleges. But let me start with you, Professor Steyn. How can we create an appetite for apprenticeship or an appetite for, to develop technical skills, particularly to attend TVET colleges, in your opinion?
Well, I think it'll help a lot. We heard earlier that the parents get too much involved in what children really want to do, and which is really a pity. One must allow our children to form their own ideas about what they would love to. Of course, there must be guidance, but don't dominate. And this was said by the others, and I fully agree with that. But I'm also a great believer, as I think it was Felicity who raised the whole question of total quality management and quality per se. I think more and more. First of all, let me say that Cranfield College is ISO 9001 certified, and we get audited every year by the British Standards Institute. But I think that the academic institutions themselves should actually focus much more on quality, and it must be a wide scope of quality, and also assist the students to better understand the environment that they are in, but also support them. Because if you fully understand quality, if you're a quality certified institution, then you pay attention holistically to things, and I think that's very, very important. Also, one must be careful, sort of, not to when you teach children, or not children, but people of after-school people, is you must expose them to not only what is existing, but also where we're going. For example, the Industry 4.0 economy, which is really upon us now, where your customer expectations are really much, much more, where creative and innovative creativity is coming to the fore, where even organizational forms, as a result of key enabling technologies, the organizational forms, the processes are changing and transforming very much. And organizations are actually being forced to transform away from the more bureaucratic style of leadership and management governance to the more virtual dynamic learning organization environment. And that should be the a quality academic institution should look to the future when they prepare their students. And we find, I mean, if I look at the MBA today, the MBA is really way beyond, way short of where they should be. They are still sort of teaching the old bureaucratic dogma.
Okay.
And they are not into the cross-functional virtual dynamic learning organization teaching yet.
Yes.
So the quality of the organization is, as Felicity said, when she spoke about the quality issues. Incidentally, we also teach TQM. Of course, that's part of our curriculum, and we practice it.
Sure.
But really, the academic institutions should really pay much, much more attention to quality. And may I just add something? The same applies, of course, to the Council on Higher Education. They want to set quality standards for us, but really, are they really a quality institution? It's time that they also get certified as an ISO 9001 institution, because they are they are shortcomings as far as that is concerned.
Thank you so much. We do have 10 minutes before we conclude this panel discussion. Felicity, maybe you can come in there. How do we create an appetite for more young people to enroll in the TVET colleges? Because we do know that, and it's unfortunately something that has come up. I've seen that somebody who's skilled in plumbing, opening an enterprise or a business is more successful than somebody, for example, with an MBA working for a multinational corporation. And I don't mean success in terms of money, but I mean success in terms of, independence, logical thinking, problem solving, and so forth. So how do you, maybe we can compare the TVET colleges to universities in terms of a benefit analysis of some sort, and how can we get more young people enrolled into these TVET colleges? Then we'll go to you, Mariette, and then we'll go to Mr. Salebi, then we'll have your closing discussions. Felicity?
Thank you, Thabang. Okay, thank you, Thabang. Firstly, okay, so I operate in the FET space and not the TVET, but I think it's pretty much similar, not
Similar,
a problem
yes.
at all. Very similar. We're not experiencing the enthusiasm or lack of people wanting to do learnerships or to do trades in the TVET colleges, as far as I'm aware. But what I can say is that as these learners engage with the FETs and the TVET colleges, yes, they are super excited to come on board and do the qualifications. However, they are not properly inducted. They need to be, it needs to be explained to them properly from the get-go what this qualification entails, or what this, in the TVET college, I'm sure Pieter can confirm with me, that if you explain and induct somebody correctly from the beginning, and you give them a proper understanding of what is going to be expected of them, then a learnership and a apprenticeship, for example, will be more successful. Also, from a FET college perspective, we don't only want to give them the qualification. We are aware that these gaps exist. We are aware that the emotional intelligence is not there, that the self-mastery is not there, self-awareness, that the digital skills are not there, that learners don't know not to put up certain profile pictures of themselves on their WhatsApp group if they're trying to get a job, for example, CV writing skills, etc. And we try and put other programs together that we weave into the qualification so that we are giving them a holistic qualification as well, and not only the key or the core skills that are applicable to the qualification. So I don't think it's so much trying to encourage people to come to the colleges, because there are hundreds and thousands of people coming to get learnerships or TVET colleges. You put one ad out on Facebook as a provider saying that there's a learnership available, and you are inundated with people desperate for qualifications. The way I see it is, the people are there, they are hungry for qualifications, but they are ill-equipped and ill-informed as to what to expect, and then the programs are not there at a lot of the colleges that will sort of round off the core skills that they are going to learn and give them sort of the other softer skills, if you want to call it that, that they might not have had an opportunity to gain while they were at school for whatever reason, be it that the public school that they were at didn't help them with that, or be it that they don't come from a home environment where that was provided for them. So I think I keep harping on it, I know, but in my opinion and in my experience, most of the learners and the youth that I've had the opportunity of engaging with, and I've engaged with some 200 of them in the last year during COVID, and they are passionate and desperate for qualifications. But if we do not give them the proper support and guidance, we make it literally impossible for them to achieve that qualification.
Absolutely. Merritt, maybe you can jump in here to say, I think Felicity mentioned, critical aspect of, emotional intelligence, and we had Mr. Anderson speak about, the self-control and so forth. How can we encourage or equip our parents, to shape their children to who they need to be? Because at the end of the day, as a parent, I believe that you're given tools to sort of, shape that child to who they want to be. I mean, if your child at the age of 3 is already taking a car and, messing it up and putting it back together, that's a mechanic there, right? And you have a child who's a great drawer, that's an artist there. So how do we as parents learn not to, influence our child in the direction that we think they should go, but in the direction that they really want to go from a tender age? How do we nurture them from your perspective?
Wow, that's a question with a real sting in the tail there, and it's a hard one. I think it was Pieter that actually said, or was it Ben, that it's right from the beginning of childhood. I think children need to be encouraged to be more independent, even if it's, for example, picking up your own toys at a very young age and taking responsibility for little things that are age appropriate. That kind of goes through the schooling and giving the children giving the children the sense that they are trusted to be able to do the tasks that their parents are asking them to do, their little chores and things like that as it goes through and as they get bigger and bigger at school. Just from a just going with that, I do, however, feel, just talking from my own experience, and kind of maybe will be generalizing, for which I apologize, but we in a independent academic school are not as privy and exposed to as many technical, if I can say I'm old school, technical colleges or FET colleges that are available. And when we have career days and we expose different facilities and faculties and universities, those kind of things to people, I would love to be able, as the guidance or life orientation teacher in the school as well, to be able to invite more of these people that offer skills, different aspects. Not every child's going to be an engineer through the university, but are better hands-on and more practical. So somehow, but if we can liaise school through the psychologists, through the counselors at school, through the life orientation teachers, liaise more with what is out there on offer. Okay, number one, other than the universities, because the universities seem to be, that often exposes the parents more to what else other than tertiary education is there. And a lot of what I understand is also these colleges, for example, if you're doing the more technical courses, you can do the N6, I'm open to correction, and then jump ship and go and continue with a degree afterwards. But parents are not aware of that. So I think if career days, parents could be given more kind of insight as to what else is out there other than a degree, and how to connect with these people, it may also just give them more idea of to be more realistic about what the child can actually can and can't do. I mean, maths and science is the biggest one. Not every child can do maths. Not every child is wired in the sense that science comes naturally, but yet parents are adamant. Maths and science is the key that opens the doors to further study. But that's not always the case. There's other ways to do maths and science in a different, more practical way that means more or has more relevance for children who are wired.
Absolutely.
So parents need to
Absolutely.
be more realistic. They need to give their children more responsibility. They need to trust that their child can do it and show the children that they trust in their worth. And then also engaging the journey at a high school level with the other educational institutions to be exposed to more of what's out there.
Absolutely. And I mean, just there, you're touching on primary and secondary socialization, primary being home and the community as well, secondary being the institutions, which then leads me to you, Mr. Salebi, in saying, how would you advise tertiary institutions to better prepare students for the workplace and, you know, working environments such as SAICA? I mean, you look for a certain caliber of individuals, not just high performing, but very well balanced. I mean, you can't go to Woolworths and buy self-control. You're not going to find it, right? It's either you have it or you don't. So how would you advise tertiary institutions to then shape students holistically in preparing them for the workplace?
So I'll call a little bit on my own experience, and I'm certainly not 100% advocating for the system that many colleges in America have. But in the course of my degree, my undergraduate degree in sociology, I took a lot of courses that had nothing to do with sociology. I had to pass a chemistry course. I had to pass a drama course. I had to learn to speak Spanish, at least for a semester, and pass the course. So there was a lot more that was exposed to me as a sociology student that was more rounded, that allowed me to get an understanding of the world is not just, you know, sociology 101 or psychology 101. So in that context, I then got an appreciation of the fact that the world needed me to have certain skills to be able to function, even if I was to go into any field related to my own qualification. So I think that's where our university system is a bit missing it. It's so focused. I mean, we see it with students that are wanting to become chartered accountants. Their curriculum and their syllabus is so full of everything that is technical that everything outside of that space is lacking. And I think that's where higher education institutions need to look at a much more well-rounded kind of degree program that exposes learners to many other things. I knew before I graduated how to dress for an interview, and mom and dad didn't teach me that. Part of my exposure at university taught me what is it that I dressed like when I go to interviews. So those kinds of things that we have, for some reason, assumed everybody has, we've sort of kind of, you know, put on the periphery and don't drive them as being very important. And for me, that's what a prep school kind of education in the US in high school began to expose me to, but also that the university then cemented in terms of now getting me ready for the workplace. You must have exposure in the field that you're working in. It can't just be all theoretical in books and library and study. You must be able to interact with the people in the professions that you're in. And so those aspects, I think, are missing. And if those were tweaked into and not seen as extra, and that's where the difficulty is, because when you look at them as extra, they're the first ones you cut immediately when someone says the curriculum is too full or there isn't enough budget. But they must be essential and built in to developing any kind of student with a professional in mind. So for me, that would be a major shift. There has been discussions around having the BCom undergraduate degree that leads towards being a CA being 4 years instead of 3 years. So that the fourth year allows you to include in there a whole lot of other things, business writing skills, public speaking skills, a whole lot of things that if you're going to be a CA, you're going to need. The issue around ethics, it can't be just one module. Hence, we see some of the challenge we see in our country around, you know, our profession as well. So that would be my advice.
Thank you so much. May I kindly request your closing remarks? I think Professor Steyn will start with you, and we'll then go to Felicity, and then we'll go to Merritt, and lastly you, Mr. Salebi. Professor Steyn, your closing
Yes,
remarks,
and
please.
I just want to, from what you said there, I just want to add something, and that is, you know, that is, they should actually encourage free speech at universities. Not as we see in so many of these, particularly the American universities, where, as they say, the First Amendment is under pressure. And because through free speech, I mean, we do have academic freedom, and it should not be suppressed by not allowing free speech or trying to suppress free speech. But let me return to the fourth industrial revolution. You know, we see that there are those aspects which the World Economic Forum also pointed out that are extremely important now in the fourth industrial revolution. But in the end, due to the partnerships that are being formed, that is because we utilize, like I said earlier, now we're moving to virtual dynamic organizations, you know, and we connect virtual networks of partners. We now connect to these organizations because you simply haven't got all the competencies on board as you should have in any organization. So the partnering helps a lot. And the partnering is then done not only with other companies, but even with knowledge workers. And that's very, very important. And so the result is that in the fourth industrial revolution, through partnering, many small and medium-sized enterprises are created. And they are job providers. In fact, many of these knowledge workers get so engaged that they even start a small business because they simply cannot handle everything themselves. And that is a major, major advantage to any economy. We all know that between 65 and 75% of all new jobs that are created in an economy annually, that's done through small and medium-sized enterprises.
That's right.
That's very important.
Yeah.
And this is why, and I still say that if you encourage the children to after school, go and learn some trade, go and get yourself organized so that you can even then form your own small business. Like if you learn to be a carpenter, I can tell you, show me a home that doesn't need a carpenter, right? And small businesses can be created. So you become a knowledge worker, and soon, especially as I said in the fourth industrial revolution, this will lead to more and more small, and the partnering will lead to more and more small and medium-sized enterprises being formed. And that is exactly what is our biggest problem in South Africa. Our people haven't got to work. That's the problem. That's the big problem. And it shows in our economy and the junk status that we have. Never mind COVID. COVID came after our junk status. So
that's right.
We're in a pretty bad spot. And we really need to encourage the kids to go and get themselves educated, to be able to do something. I mean, I can today fall back on the apprenticeship that I did. I'm a qualified artisan. So if things go wrong, I can start fixing lights and electric motors, etc., etc. And although I studied, it was a technical issue, right? Because I started my whole life as an apprentice and with techno, I studied engineering. But I can tell you something which very few people realize is, as an apprentice, I learned as much about associating with people on the ground level, right, as I did improve my technical knowledge. And that to me was extremely valuable. And that is why I say, if I could have my career over again today, what will I do? I will go and enroll myself as an apprentice at ISCOR. That's what I'll do.
Thank you so much, Professor Steyn. We truly appreciate those insights. And no, I won't forget the whole light bulb and so forth. So I'm going to get your context just in case anything happens. Thank you so much. Felicity, your closing remarks?
Thank you. Yeah, so how to overcome this gap, I think for anybody that might listen to this panel discussion today or in the future, to any potential learners out there or FET colleges, etc. I think I'm a strong believer in two key things, and that is in collaboration and in action. And I feel that we have the innovators in this country, we have the people with the knowledge, we have the programs, we have everything that we need. I think it's time to collaborate and it's time for us to act. And yeah, basically that's it. I'd like to end with a quote by Ian Swimmerholder, and he says that collaboration is the ultimate intertwining of skills, passions, and knowledge. It is what concocts the most shatterproof forms of change making. So let's make a change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Felicity. That was excellent, especially that concoction part. You see, that concoction is critical.
I practiced that word a few times. Thank you,
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Felicity. Thank you, Merritt.
Just to go on what Felicity is saying, I would say to just believe in your strengths.
Oh,
Everybody
yes.
has innate strengths. All of us do. They may not always be academic, but we need to believe in our strengths. Our parents need to see and identify our strengths. Our teachers need to also focus on our strengths, on what we can do and not what we can't do. That way, we also build resilience, and we also get children to believe in themselves. And we also get children then to follow their best hopes and their dreams. That's where I'll end it.
Oh, thank you so much. That was so profound. You know, I think we don't realize that as a nation, the impact of negativity, the impact of bad thinking, the impact. We are so surrounded with all these. There's a bomb in this country, then people are being kidnapped in that, and we become so consumed. And, you know, you've just highlighted the importance of focusing on strength, which is what the Nigerians do. When someone in the community has done something bad, they bring that person in the middle of the council and they just tell him how good he is, or they tell her how good she is, you know, and the excellent thing that they've done. So we need to learn to advocate good things about our kids and about people so that we push them and propel them forward in the future. Thank you so much, Ms. Watson, for reminding us of that. That was truly profound. Thank you. Mr. Salebi, final thoughts from your side?
I think for me, the important thing that I'd like not only learners and students and parents out there to take away maybe from this discussion is that although the transition may be fraught with many an obstacle, challenges, etc., how we help the students navigate that period of their lives sets a great foundation for how successful they can be later on in life. So I think it's important that we understand, as Felicity said, it's something that's gonna take a village. And that's been our approach, I think, within the space that I'm in, that we have taken hands with the profession, we've taken hands with the universities, we've taken hands with role models, we've taken hands with the students to say, all of us together, if we push in the same direction, we would be able to assist you to, if not realize your dreams as you might have thought you would want to be, but to also understand what's out there. And I think that's the biggest thing that I would like for people to take away, is that the transition, although challenging, is you know, just a period in your lives which helps shape you into the stronger professional, etc., that you're going to be, and that it does take a village for us to get that done, whether it's you wanting to be an artisan or a chartered accountant, or you want to be a doctor. Along the way, you're going to need people. And I think our system needs to start recognizing that and start being so compartmentalized and silo mentality, but understanding that all of us coming together can help make that transition a bit easier. Not eliminate it, because, as I said, it's part of the furnace that we all need to go through, but it needn't be a furnace that kills the dreams. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. A furnace that kills the dreams. I think this panel has truly brought the importance of change. Our country needs to stop talking and really start implementing this change. So thank you so much to all of you for your time. We do apologize that we were late, but truly we believe that these insights are going to contribute to making this world and this country a better place. We appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was the panel discussion of transitioning from secondary school to tertiary education. How do we overcome that articulation gap? And with us, we had Professor Pieter Steyn from Cranefield College. We had Mr. Bennie Anderson, CEO of Da Vinci Institute. We had Mr. Nthato Salebi, Project Director at National Projects for SAICA. We had Mrs. Merritt Watson, Educational Psychologist. And last but not least, we had Felicity Havenga, Managing Director at Pinnacle Skills Evolution. Please do check their profiles out and visit their institutions so that you can grow and get more information. Stay tuned after this.